on this computer. And I will, here we go. All right, cool. So orange wine. I think this might be the first time that is this the first time that I've done something that wasn't a geographical region? I think all the other seminars I've done have specifically been like geographic regions or like an appellation or something like that. This was the first time I'm pretty sure that I've done something that that is not a geographic region, that is a, well, something else. Doing orange wine, actually, I like doing geographic regions because, you know, like the place, all of these wines that we're going to taste today are going to taste different, not just because they're made differently and they're made from different grapes, but also because they come from different climates and soils and all of that stuff. So, anyway, though, so orange wine, hey, there's Jordan. Orange wine is not a technical term. It's not like saying Chateauneuf du Pape or, you know, like Saint-Estèphe or anything like that. Orange wine is a term that was created, you know, by like wine consumers or people in the wine business to try to explain this style of wine that technically, so what I started out here with, the clearest, simplest thing, the thing that you can't really argue over is skin contact. Orange wine is wine made from white grapes, but that have the juice has contact with the grape skins and flesh and stuff like that. I'm gonna also just interject actually two things right now, because I know a lot of people are watching this video. So the reason that I am sweating right now is because I just went for a 3.5 mile run and I didn't have time to go for a run, so I just ran faster. So I was running like 5K race pace and got back at like 3:02. Also, a whole bunch of the wines in this seminar are not things that really are necessarily for sale, that I don't really have, like, we don't have good supply of it. So they're just things that were exciting that are good examples. So with that, back to orange wine. So all orange wine is wine made from white grapes that have had contact with the skin, because you know, the way that red wine is made, well, another, like I think I said in some of the Instagram posts, another name for this style of wine is white wine made like red wine. So you're taking white grapes and you're pressing them, macerating them, whatever, like getting the juice out, and then letting the juice have contact with the skins. And that's with red wine, that's where the red color comes from, and the tannin and everything, because virtually all red grapes have white flesh. That's why you can make white wine from red grapes, e.g. Blanc de Noir and Champagne, that kind of thing. White wine, like the classic typical white wine that we're all used to, we drink today, is white grapes pressed and the juice taken away immediately. So there's no skin contact, and the juice doesn't pick up any chemical compounds from contact with the skins. That allows you to make, they call that direct press. That's like the technical term for it. So direct press is when you harvest the grapes and you press them directly and take the juice away. That is kind of difficult to do. That's probably not the way that wine was made traditionally. Traditionally, you know, to make wine like that, you would have to have a separate, you'd have to have an effective way to press the wine, and then you'd have the grapes, and then you'd have to have an effective way to transfer the juice. And you would also need to have another empty vessel to put all of the juice into. And in, you know, going back, let's say going back like 500 years, you know, there's no stainless steel, there's no plastic, anything like that. The only things that people have to store wine in are either like animal skins or like big giant stone troughs, you know, like a trough hollowed out in a rock, or barrels. That's pretty much all people had. Or clay amphora, but still, like all of those, you can't just like 200, 300, 400 years ago, you can't just run down to the winery supply store and get more of those. Having extra empty vessels is like sort of wasteful. So normally, white grapes, going back like 200, 300, 400 years ago or further, white grapes probably were generally pressed and the juice always had skin contact because that was the easiest way to make wine. And why would you want to make things harder for yourself if you're, a farmer winemaker several hundred years ago? So I think that like modern white wine, what we drink today, is sort of like a newer, like that's the new kid on the block. Also a reason for this, the reason that like pretty much all wine had skin contact going back a couple hundred years is that aging wine that way, making wine that way, the wine picks up a lot of chemical compounds, phenolic compounds from the skins, tannin, stuff like that, that actually help stabilize and protect the wine. It makes it more stable just so you can have it and enjoy it longer, as opposed to if you press the grapes, take the juice away immediately and try to ferment it and keep it clean and somehow protect it from contact with oxygen and stuff like that. That wine is going to be chemically more fragile. It's going to be easier for bacteria to colonize it and do weird stuff to it. To stabilize wine, you need to like either add sulfur, or you could pasteurize it. You could add a bunch of alcohol and fortify it. You could let it intentionally oxidize a little bit. Think about all of those historical wines like sherry, Madeira, all of those, like those are white wines that were stabilized and preserved basically by letting them oxidize and or adding alcohol to them, and or cooking them too, like vermouth. Like that was a way, like a process like that, like adding herbs and alcohol and heating it up. That was a way to stabilize the wine so that it would keep longer and you would be able to enjoy it in the future. To make really clean, fresh, zippy white wines like the Pinot Grigios and Muscadets that I'm going to use as an example, like you basically need modern technology. You have to be able to keep it cold. You need to add a bunch of sulfur to stop bacterial growth in it, and or to block the malolactic fermentation, which is a secondary fermentation where the malic acid in the wine gets broken down by bacteria into lactic acid. And lactic acid, as the name implies, is more sort of like creamy and softer tasting. All of the wines that we're going to taste today went through malolactic fermentation. So that's what orange wine technically is. I also say in here though, so that's what it technically is. But if you were in a wine shop or in a restaurant and somebody walked in and said to you and came to you and said like, hey, I want an orange wine, or somebody comes to me and says, Ned, I'm looking for orange wine. I know that they don't just mean I want a white wine that is made with skin contact. They want a wine that tastes a specific way. They want a wine that tastes like quote unquote orange wine, because orange wine, is a term. It's a term that people have created to try to simplify and make sense of this complicated thing. Because, well, let's see. So I just wanted to do this because I think it's funny. As I was thinking about this and writing about it, I remembered that Supreme Court case where one of the Supreme Court justices was asked about the Constitution protecting free speech and whether or not it protected pornography, and he was like, "Well, it doesn't protect hardcore pornography." And they were like, "Well, what's hardcore pornography?" And he was like, "Well, there's no definition, but I know it when I see it." And that's basically like orange wine. There's not a line in the sand where it's like a white wine has to have this many hours or this many days of skin contact to be quote unquote orange wine. But like, I know it when I taste it. people don't walk in and say, I want an orange wine, and by that mean a white wine that has had 6 hours of skin contact and basically tastes like a fuller bodied Sauvignon Blanc or something. Like, if people say orange wine, like the whole point of having a term, quote unquote, orange wine, is that orange wine is not normal white wine. people say they want orange wine because they want something different than white wine, and they want to make that clear. They don't have the vocabulary or the background knowledge, or for people in the wine industry, it's just handy, useful shorthand to be like, instead of saying, Josie, I want a skin contact white wine made from an aromatic grape that has gone through malolactic fermentation and is a tiny bit oxidative, but not too much. That's a mouthful. It's a lot easier to just say orange wine. So that's really, I think, more layman's terms, or like effectively in the real world, that's what orange wine is. Orange wine is wine from white grapes that is like rounder, viscous, has tannin to it, is relatively aromatic. Almost all of the orange wines that we're going to taste today are made from what I would call aromatic white grapes that are particularly like floral and perfumey and aromatic and stuff like that. Just looking to see if there's anything else here in specifically that I should cover in my talking about this. On the top of the second page or bottom of the first page, I say like, so anyway, my point is that orange wine may be a fad, but like most fads, it is a thing that has been around for a long time and will continue to be around even after orange wine is supplanted by something else, by purple wine. I just made that up. Currently there is no purple wine category in the wine industry. Maybe I'll make one, or someone else will make one, but I'm just saying, like, there will be other things, fads that come along, and probably all of them are things that already exist and will continue existing. Orange wine is only new in that it's sort of been rediscovered by us here, by the wine industry, but it existed all over the world. Pretty much everywhere where wine was made, they would have made an orange wine because it's just an easy, natural thing to make. It's the first step before you make, clean, zippy, crisp white wine. Orange wine is associated with some particular parts of the world. I'm really sorry that my camera cannot decide on how bright it wants to be or not. I keep getting brighter and darker here, but anyway. Orange wine existed everywhere. A lot of places it sort of died out because they moved forward. Winemaking culture there and winemaking technology moved on into the 19th and 20th centuries, and they were exposed to broader, more national, international markets, and had the technology to make bright, crisp, fresh white wines. Orange wine continued on in different parts of the world that were, sort of corners that were sort of forgotten by the wine industry. So places that are associated with orange wine today are Georgia in the Southern Caucasus Mountains, Slovenia, in the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, across the border from Italy, up in the Julian Alps there, which is a very rural sort of place that's like a frontier that's a little bit forgotten by the world. Rural parts of Spain. There is orange wine there. I guess it's a little bit less associated with there. Rural Chile, Bio and Ataca Valley down in southern Chile. That again, actually on that map, right? Where's my finger? Right up there behind me on the wall. There's Chile. That's another place where there was winemaking culture there, and it was just completely forgotten by the rest of the world for hundreds of years. And so they just kept on doing what they had always been doing, and that was making orange wine, because they didn't have the technology to make super fresh, crisp, bright white wines. you know, if you go back like 80 years, who even had stainless steel tanks and temperature control, like refrigeration and stuff like that? The dairy industry, I think, but I don't, so by and large, I don't think that the winemaking industry really did. So that's why, like, down, I think in rural Chile, like pretty much all of the white wine that was made for a long time, all of it was orange wine, because that was really, like, technologically all they could make. It wasn't until very recently that they could start making other stuff. I'm going to pull a shot of espresso for myself right now. There we go. Anyway, all right, and then we're about to start drinking wine, but I also am going to point out that it is more complicated than just saying orange wines are white grapes with skin contact, because, as I say partway down here, not all skin contact is created equal. Yeah, like there's the first clearest, simplest thing of like, well, how much skin contact did the wine have? Like, was it 6 hours? Was it 2 days? Was it 2 weeks? Was it like months? But then there's also like, what type of skin contact? You know, like it could be skin contact where the juice is in like a big open stone trough and it's literally just open to the atmosphere on the top, and the grapes are just thrown in there and sort of like people jump in there and trod them and then they stir them up every day. Or you could have skin contact where like the fermenting grapes and juice goes into a sealed cement tank and there's like a little hatch at the top, and once a day the winemaker or somebody climbs up there and opens it up and like reaches down in with a pole to punch those skins down into the wine. But it's sealed most of the time and it is maybe better insulated. And there also may be like, well, it's fermenting, so there's CO2 in there and the CO2 is building up, and the CO2 is basically sitting on top of the fermenting wine and protecting it from oxidizing. How the grapes are destemmed, even just drilling down into like some of these Chilean wines, you know, some of the wines are destemmed by running the clusters of grapes, the bunches of grapes, through a destemming machine where it's like a big screw that goes around with little holes in it, and the grapes go through it and the stems get stuck in it and basically like get stuck in a filter or get just like spun out of the machine and stuff. But like in that process, the grapes all get chopped up and crushed, and you have this like grape juice pulp slurry that just comes out the end of it going like pop, 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 pop. Then you have others where like stepping on grapes by foot is actually like more gentle on the grapes and will communicate less tannin and stuff to the wine. One of my favorite orange wines, or actually one of the prettiest orange wines I've ever had, I think, is the Piccoli Passi from Podere Sassi in northern Lazio. And I drank a bottle of that a couple of weeks ago. And just in writing about this, I was thinking about it, and I contacted Leo, the guy, the owner winemaker guy there, the other day by Instagram, and I was like, "Why is your wine so much prettier than all the other orange wines I can think of?" And he was like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Well, what do you do?" And he was like, "It has skin contact for 17 days. That's, you know." And I was like, "Do you do punch down in an open like vat?" And I was always like, "Do you do punch downs?" And he was like, "Yeah." But he was like, "Well, I don't do a lot of punch downs at the start of fermentation. And then I do more sort of in the middle, but then I slow down again and I do very few punch downs at the end of fermentation and stuff." And so like my point is just that there's a lot of variation among all of these. And like, it's not as simple as just saying like how many days of skin contact, because like skin contact in a cement tank versus skin contact in a stainless steel tank versus skin contact in like an open stone trough versus you get my point. I'm going to shoot this espresso and then we're going to start drinking wine. All right. So wine number one here. This is, here we go. Fausto Ciolario, Il Buffone. I used to try to avoid doing wine seminars with sparkling wines because I was worried that the wine would go flat, and then I just figured, screw it, I should try. So I hope all of your wines are still fizzy. I hope they are not flat like that. So this is from Piedmont, Northern Italy. This is a blend of Nascetta, which is a local indigenous white grape, and Muscat or Moscato. I want to say this is more Nascetta than Moscato. Nascetta has thicker skins. It's a, I believe, lower acidity grape, and Moscato is a particularly aromatic and low acidity white grape. Fausto Ciolario, I feel like, is really, really good at using Moscato and getting the aromatics from it, but not having the resulting wines be like too cloying or big or whatever. Like I think he's very good. He is very proud of his Dolcetto. I think he's amazing at Moscato blends like this. This goes through fermentation, and then he adds some grape juice back to it from other grapes he has harvested. So he adds unfermented, his own like grape juice, but from like a little later in the harvest, adds that to the wine that has finished fermenting. So he's adding a precise amount of sugar, but it is just grape juice. He bottles it, and then it finishes fermenting in the bottle. And that is why it's cloudy. Maybe even mosquito repellent. Yep. Yeah, cloudy, sediment. And this is important because the effervescence in the wine, having CO2 dissolved in the wine, will lower its pH and increase the like effective acidity of the wine, and that helps preserve it and protect it over time, and in transit and shipping and stuff like that. Yeah, I love the aroma of this. Like it's identifiably Moscato, but it's not like full on like take a bath in perfume Moscato. It's prettier. It's like white wildflowers and maybe some lilac. I'm gonna look here. What did you say, Michael? Yeah, lemon, lilac, maybe even mosquito repellent in a good way. Yeah, that. Yeah, yep. Yeah, maybe like tropical, like melon, like honeydew melon or something here. Prickly, fun. So this supposedly has 6 days of skin contact. I don't know if this actually went through malolactic fermentation because it finished fermentation in the bottle, and the effervescence in the CO2 might act to naturally prevent it from going through malolactic fermentation. And because this is like fresher and brighter. So I would call this like, I would call it delicious and fizzy and frothy like a beer, and extremely thirst quenching. If someone was talking to me about it, I break orange wine down into 2 different camps. I break that orange wine into orange wine light, which is orange wines like this that have not a ton of skin contact and are still like bright and fresh and and thirst quenching, and then like full on traditional classic orange wines, which are darker, more tannic and stuff like that, and have like weeks or months of skin contact. So this at 6 days of skin contact is meaningful skin contact that changes the wine, but it's not like full on deep, and it's not oxidative at all. Also, it's not just skin contact. Like there's other winemaking techniques that influence whether or not a wine tastes like a quote unquote orange wine. oxidation is something that people associate with orange wine. This is not oxidative because it's finished fermentation in the bottle. It's so delicious. And you get more of that like real aromatic, like muscat on the finish too. Okay. All right. On to wine number 2. Wine number 2 is a ringer. Wine number 2 is not actually an orange wine, and that's why I included it. Just to make the point that it's not just about skin contact. Let's hold it up here. See, so like that has a fair amount of color to it. You know, like if you walked into a store and you saw this on a shelf, this big clear glass bottle with very visibly like yellow cloudy wine in it, like this looks for all appearances like it's an orange wine. This is Dinamo Nucleo 2 Litro Bianco. This is 100% Trebbiano, Trebbiano Toscano from Umbria, from right by Lake Trasimeno. And I am going to the website because there is a really good picture of the soil here. This comes from basically the highest elevation, one of the highest elevation spots around Lake Trasimeno. I want to say it's something like 400 meters above sea level is what Danilo was telling me. Here you go. So here's part of the vineyard, and like it's just all this calcareous rock. It's very, very rocky soil, which is great for limiting yield. So this is supposedly direct press, but it is like native yeast fermentation, no temperature control. Like I assume that the winery that this ferments in is like cool. You know, it's at least like a well-insulated temperature sort of protected place, but there's no active temperature control on the tanks that this ferments in. This ferments in stainless steel. So it's direct press, and this definitely, there's no sulfur added to this. And this went through malolactic fermentation. So that no sulfur being added. Sulfur is a clarifying agent. When you don't add any sulfur to a white wine, generally the white wine ends up like having more color to it and changing color. So that's part of why this has more like yellowy color to it, just because no sulfur was added to it. Done in stainless steel, so it's not like particular. It was a relatively airtight tank, and it is not oxidative. It smells kind of honey. Trebbiano isn't the most aromatic white grape variety, but it is sort of kind of aromatic, and it's another like lower acid white grape variety that like is sort of similar to some of these other grapes that we're drinking here today. To me, it smells sort of like honeyed, peaches, maybe rose, golden apple, really like golden, delicious, stuff like that. And it has a lot of mouthfeel. Like this has got body to it, and it's a little bit like spicy. Little tiny bit spicy on the like the finish. There's a lot of there's a saltiness that like sort of wakes my taste buds up and gets me salivating. It very much like also they make this winery makes an orange wine that is also made from Trebbiano, and I'm sold out of that, or I sold out of that, that vintage. But when I had it and I tasted these side by side, they tasted very similar, even though this has supposedly 0 skin contact, and the other one, the Dynamo orange wine, had like 8 days of skin contact. They tasted very similar. So this goes to my point that like what people think of as being orange wine and tasting like an orange wine, it's not necessarily just the skin contact. Some of it is the winemaking, some of it is the presence or lack thereof of sulfur, oxidization, stuff like that. But there it is. So that's my, I would sort of kind of put this in, I don't know, the periphery of the orange wine camp, just because it does not taste like a normal white wine. All right. Wine number 3 is a Malvasia. Malvasia is a more aromatic, fuller bodied white grape. And this comes from Collicapretta, which is a super old family winery. Smells appley, outside of Spoleto in like central Umbria. And I'm gonna quickly look and see if I can get to pictures of them, because somewhere on this computer I just put pictures of them on. We drank a wine from Collicapretta last week. We had their rosé open in the seminar. This is Malvasia. This had 3 days of skin contact. Malvasia della Scarparo. It is a single vineyard. All right, here we go. Screen share. There is Annalisa Collicapretta filling up. That might have actually, wait, what does it say there? Trebbiano. It says Trebbiano Spoletino. It doesn't say what that wine actually is, I don't think. It just says like Vino IGT Umbria maybe. But okay, so that's not this. That might be Vigna Vecchia. Tizio, super old dried out grape cluster. Oh, that's right. I remember that picture from last week. That was Danilo and Vittorio, the whatever padrone of the family of the winery there. Anyway, okay. Malvasia della Scarparo. So 3 days of skin contact. This has more color. This has more color than the other two. It has more color than the Cellario. Collicapretta is a family that's been here on, so it's Collicapretta means Hill of the Goat. The Mattioli family has been here for like, they don't, 1,000 years, something like that. Like they've been here for a very, very, very long time. As contadini, as just like small scale, like subsistence farmers. The town, the specific town here is Terzo La Pieve. I'll just try to, so the label, it won't zoom in clear enough to actually read that, but I'll try to just quickly, the label is just an Italian explanation of what this wine is. So I'll try to quickly read what this is. It's Malvasia Bianca. It was for 10 years. It's from a specific vineyard called Lo Scarparo because it used to be owned by a shoemaker. For 10 years, it was completely abandoned. Completo stato di abbandono. Abbiamo recuperato le piante. They've recovered the plants. They have pruned them and given them new structure. This wine is the first result of the vinification of these grapes that were harvested in the middle of October. They macerated the grapes for 3 days Then they pressed the grapes off with an old type of press, like a I don't know, like a basket press, I think, Torquillo. And then it was aged in an acacia wood barrel for a finamento for aging. And then it was racked twice, due travasi. And then it was bottled without any added sulfur. And then something about which phase of the moon it was bottled in and produced without chemicals. So the Colica presses have been here forever. And that visit back in 2019 when I was there, I remember they actually, so I went and we had like Sunday lunch together, and they had gone out, they had made like a special lunch for me, and they had gone out and shot a bunch of migrating, just three migrating songbirds for me that they had roasted whole. And they were like, here, you just put the entire little bird in your mouth and just eat the entire little bird and crunched up and stuff like that. And it was totally like, it was a special thing that they'd done because I was visiting, but it was also sort of a joke to be like, what's this crazy, how's this crazy American gonna react if we give him little tiny roasted songbirds to eat? You know, and so I was like, sure, I'll eat these tiny little birds and stuff. But they were like, this is just what we do. Like, we have always, at this time of year, like we always go out and like we harvest some of these migrating birds. Like, we have always been here. We have always done these things. We are always going to do these things. And they really, Annalisa, the daughter who is now the winemaker and stuff and sort of running the show, she explicitly said, she was like, we're happy that the world appreciates what we're doing now and likes our wines, but we're never going to change. We're never, like, this is just what we've always done. We've always made wines this way, and we're always going to make wines this way. Like, we do not care what the world wants or what happens. Like, it's cool that people in America are excited about these things, and we like you and we appreciate you coming. But like, if the world moves on, we don't care. We're still going to be here living, you know, in our little hilltop little, you know, house and like making these wines and stuff. So this, even though this is only 3 days of skin contact, this is in a way more in that like traditionalist camp. And this is also a demonstration of like, this is how they've always made wine here. And they've made wine this way because this is how you made wine when you did not have modern technology of like filtration and adding sulfur and adding like different compounds and yeast to do the fermentation super quickly and stuff to stabilize the wine. You had to do some skin contact in order to make a like complete stable wine that wouldn't just spoil and turn into vinegar. So not filtered or fined at all, but they transferred it from tank to tank several times, racking it off of the sediment that had settled out, and that's why this is pretty clear. Also, I didn't shake the bottle up at all. I just poured it right off. Smells like ripe pear to me. Really sunny, a little bit of like apricot, like dried apricot. More viscous on the palate, and it does have some tannin to it. I feel like yeah, I can definitely feel tannin after the finish on my palate. It dries my mouth out a little bit. Yeah, that's classic Malvasia. There's like a pithy, fleshy hint of like bubblegummy fruit in the mid palate that to me is very classic Malvasia. Like pretty much all the Malvasias I think that I've had, like those are commonalities among all of them. I do wonder why this, with 3 days of skin contact, like this is more of a quote unquote orange wine than some of the others. It may have to do with the fact that this was pressed with a more traditional basket press that like squeeze the grapes harder and squeeze the skins and in that process, like extracted more of the tannin and more of those phenolic compounds from the skin. I like that a lot. I'll just point out they made 1,026 bottles of this. So like 80-ish cases of this wine were produced. I think I got like 5. That's how Colli Capretta is. That's how Colli Capretta is. They're great, but they're small and it's hard to get them. So it's always fun to taste their wine. Let's see. Next up, number 4 is Cacique Maravilla Naranja, which is Spanish for orange. This is so like, I mean, look at that orange label. It says Vino Naranja. It says orange wine right on the front label of it. This is from Chile. This is from Bio Bio. This is from Manuel Moraga, who is the current owner winemaker at Cacique Maravilla, which means like the marvelous, the fantastic captain. So he took over from his father. He inherited this winery. Cacique Maravilla, the winery, was founded in 1776 by his great grandfather, I think it was, or maybe it was great grandfather. I think it's sixth generation. This is an interjection here. I would say that in general, with like real full-on orange wines, it's probably good to like shake them up a little bit before you serve them to make sure that the sediment that's down in the bottom of the bottle is like evenly distributed throughout the wine. Otherwise, like the first couple glasses are going to be very clear, and then like the last glass or two from the bottle is going to be a lot cloudier. And if you're pouring for a table of people might be like, wait a minute, why did I get the very cloudy glass? It's supposed to be cloudy, it's fine, but it just looks a little funny if you don't shake it up so it's evenly distributed. So I was lucky enough to go and visit Cacique Maravilla right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm gonna see if I can get to pictures of these wines. There we go. So this is actually at a different winery, but this is Muscat Alejandra. This wine, the Cacique Maravilla, is 100% Moscato, Muscat Alejandra, and it's harvested and then grapes thrown into open vats and let just ferment like that, exposed to the air. That was a fiberglass one. A lot of the fermentation actually happened in, where is that? Here we go. This is what Cacique Maravilla uses a lot, is just open stone vats like that to do the fermentation for their orange wines. See if I can get to. Here we go. No, video. Here, okay. Here are the vineyards, like 10 kilometers from the Pacific Ocean. Those are Pais vines. There's Manuel Moraga. So this gets 2 months on the skins. This is 0 sulfur, no filtration, no fining. And again, Muscatel very aromatic white grape. And it's, I mean, it's, to me, it just smells gorgeous. This was his winery. It was sort of destroyed in the earthquake of, I forget when that was, 2010? No, it was further back than that. But the winery, there was a bad earthquake in this part of Chile, and the winery was destroyed and has since been rebuilt, but still extremely traditional. I would highly recommend Cacique Maravilla's Instagram feed, because Manuel is super active on Instagram and is like constantly posting pictures of like his gigantic, huge old Rowley wood vats and stuff like that, and pressing grapes and just, you know, like whatever cool stuff is happening in the winery at the time. So this is 2 months on the skins in like open concrete vats like that. And they just like stir them, and they have basically like sort of like wooden like rakes that they use to stir it up and you know, agitate the grapes and the juice and stuff like that. And there's just constant, like, there's so many bees flying around. It's just like swarms and swarms of bees and yellow jackets and stuff. So probably these labels should say, you know, like 99% Muscat Alejandra and like 1% bees is what this is made from. Very perfumey, very like flowery, like lilac, viburnum bushes, just basically all the flowers. It just smells like all of the flowers, like apple blossoms, cherry blossoms, white roses to me. I think that Moscato works very well to make orange wine, because Moscato doesn't have a whole lot of acidity. A lot of aromatic white grapes do not have a lot of acidity. And so when you try to make like completely dry, like direct press, no skin contact, like very light, crisp white wine from Moscato or like from Malvasia, it just doesn't really work that well, because they don't naturally have a whole lot of acidity. And so you wind up with these wines that are just very, very simple or very flat. With Moscato, if you try to make like a totally dry Moscato that's, you know, like made in the same style as like a really light, clean, crisp, clear Pinot Grigio or Muscadet, you get the perfume and the aromatics of this, but then there's just like nothing else. There's no acidity, there's no crispness. So when you do this, when you have skin contact with the wine, then you compensate for that lack of acidity with the tannin and the mouthfeel and stuff like that. And so you gain this other dimension that sort of balances out and offsets the aromatic, perfumey, like tropical fruit of the wine. And I think it makes a much more balanced, complete wine. And considering, like, thinking that skin contact was how most white wines were made for a lot of human history and civilization, it sort of makes sense, or it reinforces or makes sense why Muscat, Moscato, Muscatel is one of the oldest cultivated grape varieties. Like, man, it's a very, very old grape variety. Mankind has been cultivating Moscato, Muscatel for something like 2,000 years, I think. They think it's a very old grape variety that's been around, you know. And so if everybody was making skin contact wines 1,000 years ago, it would make, you know, this is a grape variety that does that very well. And this is a very stable wine because it's already somewhat oxidated from fermenting in open tanks like that. And having all the skins on the top to an extent helps protect it from oxidation. But yeah, this is like, it's a, you know, it is a very stable wine because of that winemaking process. It has a spice to it too. Like there's some tannin, not too much tannin. I believe Moscato is a relatively thin skinned grape. But it has it also has like a spice to it that's pretty cool. And then as a juxtaposition here from just this is, I don't know how far away this is, like 10, 15 miles away, Molino del Ciego in southern Chile. So this is different grape variety. This is Semillon from the Ataca Valley. So this is just to the north of where Manuel Moraga is. And this is 90-year-old vines, hand harvested by Roberto Enriquez. And Roberto is a great guy. He's a very talented winemaker. He is, I would call him like a more precise sort of winemaker. So this also has a lot of color to it. It's also like golden looking. Trying to remember. This has about 2 weeks of skin contact, something between 1 to 3 weeks of skin contact for this. Roberto said that basically he lets this stay on the skins for as long as it's still in its primary fermentation. So the grapes come into the winery, and I'm going to go back to, I have a lot of pictures because I went and visited Roberto at the same time. So I have a lot of pictures of him and his winery. Grapes come into the winery, and oh, here we go. Here is his winery. Those are Moscato grapes. So this is Semillon. Those are Moscato grapes. That's me in the pink. This is one form of destemming them, is pushing the grapes back and forth over a bamboo mat. And so you just push them back and forth and push them into the mat, and that breaks the skins, and the stems get stuck on the mat, and the juice and the bits of pulp and flesh fall between the bamboo sticks and fall into like the container below it. That's a super traditional way of doing destemming. That's how it's been done, you know, in Chile for hundreds of years, like 200-300 years probably. And I want to say that might actually be a more gentle way of destemming the grapes compared to, I'll see if I can find a picture of Roberto's destemmer. Here we go. So this is a mechanical destemmer. So you have the screw here that goes around and it pulls the clusters of grapes into the machine, and the grapes go down through a little drain, and then through a hose down into a pump, and the stems all get stuck in a mesh or get just like thrown out by the screw out of the machine. But in the process of like that happening, the grapes all basically all get chopped up and get very oh, that's a video. There's video. Does the video come through in screen share? You are seeing that? Okay, cool. Yeah, so there, okay, yeah, there's all the stems coming out the bottom. Grapes go through, they get all chopped up, and then there's just like this pulp of, or like slurry of like pulp and juice and stuff like that going out into the tank over there. So anyway, just saying that like when you hear that like grapes were when someone says, "Oh, my grapes were destemmed," it's not like they just gently pick each individual grape off of the cluster of grapes. Like it's a intense like physical process that effectively like macerates the grapes and provides like skin contact and stuff between the juice and the skins and the flesh and everything. Actually, somewhere here I've got some pictures of where those. Okay, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So this is the Ataca Valley. This is basically like where those grapes came from. So granitic, like very dry soil. These are a bunch of Semillon vines here on a ridge, dry, really intense sun. Yep, there's like the ridge top looking out towards, I believe that's towards the Pacific Ocean there. No, it smells so different. It smells like wintergreen to me. So this is 2 weeks, like somewhere 2, maybe even 3 weeks of skin contact in old oak barrels that are open, but that are like some sort of cover put over the top, I think, a fair amount of the time. Punch downs daily, but you know, so like, but this is a pretty clear, I would say polished white wine. Actually, it smells actually very savory, like a little bit like gingerbread or cinnamon. Like there's baking stuff here. It smells like food to me. Like also smells like stone fruit, like peach. That spice. Ripe, sunny. Has a lot of mouthfeel. It has tannin. It doesn't have a ton of tannin. The tannins are like integrated and balanced by the fruit and the saltiness, the minerality that it has. Again, there's not a lot of acidity here. Semillon is not an acidic grape variety. That's just not. Semillon, acidity is not what Semillon is ever known for. But this is juicy and spicy and complex. Like, honestly, this is sort of, I don't know what this is worth, or meaningless almost for talking about orange wines, but I feel like I've had plenty of, we've got plenty, or I've had plenty of California Chardonnays that were aged in oak barrels, and like wines, California Chardonnays that have spice and tannin to them from the oak, you know, tannin that was communicated to them from the oak barrels that are clumsy and stuff. Though this, the Molino del Ciego, is, you know, sort of kind of a similar weight to some of those wines and has like a similar amount of tannin, but it's a much more like interesting, elegant, complete wine because those are tannins that actually came from the grapes. And you have all of these other balancing flavors and like savory, spicy qualities to it. It's just that those flavors and everything came from the grapes instead of being added by oak barrels. I think Roberto is a great winemaker. But you know, so just the point here though is like that's 2 to 3 weeks of skin contact and a fair amount of like maceration and everything. But this is very elegant, clear wine, and I don't know if this is really for someone that came in and was like, I want an orange wine. I don't know if this would necessarily be what they're thinking of or exactly what they're going for, because this is so elegant and could be, you know, mistaken for like some kind of interesting Chardonnay or like a Chenin Blanc or something like that. Interestingly, maybe a little olive oil. Yeah, olives. Yeah, definitely like green or black olives a little bit of that like bitterness. Yeah. Oh yeah, Roberto did actually do like a stage for the better part of the year, I think, with Agnes and Renee Moss in Anjou in the Loire. So Roberto does have this like Loire connection and is very familiar with Chenin Blanc and stuff like that. So it's just, you know, for me, the fact that this reminds me a little bit of Chenin Blanc makes sense. Okay, last wine. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Bajta Kobal Bajta from Slovenia. This is the Darn it. How do I pronounce that? Lower Styria. It's the Starska, I believe. Starska Valley. So Lower Styria in Slovenia. It's a blend of Pinot Grigio, Gewürztraminer, Veltliner, and Chardonnay. The grapes are all grown separately, harvested, fermented individually, and all have varying amounts of skin contact. The Pinot Gris, aka Pinot Grigio, has the most skin contact, which, according to the label here, is 37 days. Barrel fermented and barrel aged. And then, yep, so approximately 37 days of skin contact, and then 2 years in barrel. And that's much more, this is the most like legitimately orange looking wine, I think, of all of the wines today. And at 37 days, this isn't, it's not the most skin contact of all the wines today. You know, that was the Cacique Maravilla Naranja that had the most skin contact. But remember, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris, it's called Pinot Gris, like gray Pinot, because the skins do actually have color to them. And I would bet from looking at this wine and the color that it's got, like it's actually a little bit pink. I would bet that these were Pinot Grigio grapes that were actually like relatively ripe when they were harvested, and like and had skin and had pigment to them. So the, you know, letting this age on the skin, giving it that time in barrel on the skin, gave it more color. Smells savory, like baked goods, a little bit like vanilla. Also like pear. Sort of, man, you know, also like lemon. Maybe also kiwi. It also has a perfume to it. It has a real aromatic quality. It is flowery. This also has a lot of salt to it. A lot of salt and some tannin to it here. So this is, yeah, this is also, I would put this in like the more traditional, like serious orange wine camp, like more slightly sort of kind of a little bit rustic, but just also like richer, riper, more skin contact, more tannin. A little bit more savory, like salty, you know, like less fruit driven than some of the other whites. To that idea of like people who ask for orange wine are asking for wines that taste a specific way. Orange wine has a connotation, or orange wine sort of implies like wine making that is more natural, because orange wine, making wine like this, skin contact white wines, maybe kind of usually a little bit oxidative. It's a more traditional way of making wine, and that's the kind of thing that like quote unquote natural wineries do. So orange wine is not, like, you can make orange wines that are not natural, that like you can add yeast to the fermentation, you can do stuff like that to like try to control it, absolutely. But by and large, the people who are willing to make orange wines, it's usually natural winemakers, wineries. That process of having skin contact and letting like, you know, the like malolactic fermentation happen and letting the like yeast from the skins do whatever they're going to do and letting whatever other bacteria are there do their thing to make the wine. That's just, it's the kind of thing that like a normal big conventional winery would sort of shy away from. And so you don't usually, I don't think I've ever actually seen an orange wine that was produced quote unquote like conventionally with like additives and stuff like that. I've also never seen an orange wine, I don't think, that's made on a very large scale, that's made like on an industrial scale. Orange wine, because it's you have to age it longer, because it takes longer, it's a longer process, and it's a little bit, it's more annoying. Like generally, if you have the skins in there with the wine, you have to be doing something. You can't just set it and forget it and walk away, which is what you can do with crisp, clean, conventional white wine. Like you press the grapes, you get that juice into a tank, you add your engineered yeast and enzymes, and then basically like you can set the temperature on the tank and you can walk away and leave it and know that it's going to be totally fine, you know, for like a week or a couple weeks or whatever, however long. With orange wine, someone has got to be stirring those skins. Someone has got to be punching them down so that it doesn't just sit there and dry out on the very top. If you let the skins all rise to the surface because you have the juice fermenting, CO2 is bubbling up out of it, you know, and so the skins will float up to the top and form a cap on top of the wine. If you let the cap just sit there, it'll dry out, and then weird things will start to live on it. Like it might start to grow mold or some kind of weird fungus or something that might not be what you want in your wine. So pretty much all of these are made by punching that down periodically, and you can do that more or less aggressively, more or less violently. Like I was saying, Leo at Versace, you know, varies it over the 17 days that he does skin contact of his white wine, orange wine. But that's a good reason. Oh, other option is pump over. You can just like have a pump and pump juice from the bottom of the tank up to the top of the tank and pump it onto the cap, and then it settles through the skins, keeps them moist. That's a little bit like less invasive. You also, I know some people, Elizabeth Foradori, Eric Texier, some of them, they will actually have like a metal, a wire, like mesh sort of grate that they will drop down into the tank and suspend in the wine. And so that will hold the skins down below the surface of the fermenting wine. And so it's almost like, you know, like you're not beating it up, you're not pressing it and squeezing the skins and getting all those chemical compounds and polyphenols into the wine. You're just steeping it. It's like a tea bag, you know, like in hot water, steeping and like infusing it with flavor. That's what some people do, and that's a more gentle way of doing it and getting influence from the skins, but without getting as much tannin and roughness into the resulting wine from it. Anyway, so there's a lot of different ways, but all of those different ways take effort, take manual labor. Someone's got to like be there doing that all the time on a regular schedule. And for a really big industrial winery that's turning out, you know, like hundreds of thousands of cases of wine or something like that, or whatever, you know, that's just not realistic. So all of the orange wines that I've ever seen have been relatively small production. They've been somewhere generally on the natural spectrum. And there's a lot of interest in orange wine right now, but I work with a lot of orange wines, and pretty much all of them are made in smaller quantities. They come in and they sell out. And so it's this constant turnover of like, this comes in, sells out, then this other thing comes in, and there's just a constant sort of like parade of different orange wines coming through. And there's never been anything that I can actually have in any sort of continuity. which I'm totally fine with. I think that's cool. And I do think that that sort of like plays into the orange wine mystique and like makes a certain subset of people like myself and consumers interested in orange wines and interested in exploring all of those different versions and, you know, avenues of sort of like making it and the expressions of it. I'm also going to talk about Georgia super quickly, just because I feel like I should say Georgia because we're talking about orange wine, and orange wine is very, very strongly associated with Georgia and making wine in amphora, or as they are called in Georgia, kvevery. Kvevery are Georgian amphora, which are generally pretty large. I want to say like 3,000 to 5,000 liters clay amphora that are buried in the ground, where in some parts of Spain, they still make wine with amphora, and in southern Chile, they still make wine with clay amphora. I don't know if there's really anybody in southern Chile who is still making clay amphora down there. Most of them, all of them that I saw when I was there were like 60, 70, 80, 100 years old. But in Spain, they make clay amphora, and they're called tinaja, and they're, I forget how many liters, but they're like several hundred liters. And you can bury them, but a lot of people don't bury them because they're small enough that they're like 4 or 5 feet high. You can put it on like a little metal frame and like wheel it around and stuff like that, and be able to like reposition it in the winery and things, and it's more convenient. Georgian kvevery are larger, and you can't really do that. You sort of kind of have to bury them in the ground because they're just too large to have sitting around or be manageable any other way. Georgia has this tradition, and they've continued making wine, both red and white, in kvevery for, you know, whatever, thousands of years. And so orange wine and white wines made with skin contact, particularly in Georgia, it's like months of skin contact in buried clay amphora. They have a very strong tradition of that, and that's what a lot of people like think of in their minds when they think of orange wine. Those are, of the wines that we tasted today, those are closest to the Baita, the Cobalt Baita from Slovenia. Like they have more tannin and stuff like that. They're like real full-on traditional orange wines. I finally found wines from Georgia that I like, and I have them coming, but they're not here yet. So, oh well, not in time for this course. Maybe I'll do another seminar about Georgian wines at some point in the future. I think that covers everything that I wanted to cover about Georgian wines. Does anybody have questions about, not Georgian wines, about orange wines? Does anybody have questions about orange wines while we're still here? No? Cool. All right, great. Next week is going to be Forlorn Hope. I'm going to just do this one winery in California, which is a really interesting winery that started off as like tiny little winery, like crazy passionate guy buying like wacky, unusual grape varieties from old vineyards in California and like experimenting and making like experiments and like natural wines. And he's just gotten better and better and refined what he does. And then this woman from Portland, Maine, you know, Danielle, who worked at restaurants in Portland, moved out to California and like did an internship with him, and like then he hired her, and now she's the assistant winemaker and has like helped develop and build the winery into what it is now and stuff. But so Forlorn Hope. So Danielle is gonna be the guest next week. They make some really, really interesting, cool stuff from California. And then I'm not sure, I really actually want to do a seminar on the Jura. It's just tricky to get enough Jura wines to actually do a seminar. So I'm trying to get my hands on more Jura and Savoie stuff, but I'm like, yeah, I'm almost there. I have like some stuff, but I just like, I need like a few more wines. If I keep harassing all the importers I'm doing business with now, and I think that within like the next couple of weeks, I will have enough stockpile that I'll be able to do a Jura seminar. So Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for hanging out and tasting orange wines with me. I hope this was helpful. Have a great afternoon. I will see you all soon. Bye.
Thanks, Ned. Great stuff. Bye-bye.
Welcome.